back. In this video, we explore the iconic moment that changed everything about Spaceball. The returns of the legendary star. You will see why fans still talk about it and what makes this comeback unforgettable.
Spaceballs hit 1987 like a joke nobody asked for. Critics shrugged. The box office flatlined. Then VHS brought it back from the dead and turned it into scripture. But behind the ludicrous speed and dark helmet gasping for air, there was off-screen lunacy bigger than anything in the actual movie. George Lucas blessed the parody that should have been a lawsuit. Yogurt's gold makeup was originally painted for Gene Wilder. And the title? It came from 5 minutes of pure panic. These are 17 weird facts about Spaceballs, where a cosmic disaster became a cult religion, and the joke outlived the empire it mocked. Number 1. How Spaceballs was born by accident. Mel Brooks didn't wake up one morning and decide on Spaceballs. His first instinct was louder, sillier, and way more dangerous. Planet Moron, a title so unapologetically stupid he couldn't stop laughing at it. But just as he was gearing up to announce it, a British sci-fi comedy called Morons from Outer Space hit theaters. Overnight, the joke he wanted became a joke he couldn't touch. Brooks panicked for about 5 minutes, then did what he always did. He improvised. He still wanted the word space for marketing. He still wanted something screwball to signal the tone. So he slammed the two ideas together, space plus screwball, and out popped a title that sounded like a parody of itself. And that was the magic. The moment you hear the word Spaceballs, you know exactly what movie you're walking into. A universe where nothing is sacred, everything is stupid on purpose, and the title tells the first joke before the film even begins. Number 2. Star Wars approved this parody. Before a single frame was shot, Mel Brooks did something no spoof director had ever done. He went straight to the temple. He walked into Lucasfilm, sat down with George Lucas himself, and asked permission to parody Star Wars. No legal team, no agents, just two filmmakers staring across a table built on sci-fi history. Lucas didn't just say yes. He stunned Brooks by encouraging the idea. He said he'd watched an early rough cut and admitted something Brooks never expected. Spaceballs still worked even without the jokes. Underneath the absurdity, he saw a real adventure, a story, a heartbeat. There was one rule: no merchandise, no toys, no lunchboxes, no selling anything that could compete with the empire Lucas built. Brooks agreed, and later turned the restriction into one of the greatest running gags in parody history. The truth is simple: Spaceballs wasn't a rebellion against Star Wars. It was a parody blessed by the very Jedi who made the galaxy worth spoofing. Number 3. A tiny spoof that came first. By the time Mel Brooks pointed his cameras at the stars, someone else had already taken a shot, with a budget so tiny it could fit inside a blaster holster. In 1978, amateur filmmaker Ernie Foselius made Hardware Wars, a 12-minute parody where toasters flew like TIE fighters, flashlights became lightsaber, and tinfoil did the work of ILM. Shot for just $8,000, the short went viral decades before viral existed, playing in festivals, on college campuses, and in late-night TV blocks where audiences howled at ships literally made from kitchen appliances. Even George Lucas loved it, calling it his favorite Star Wars parody. When Foselius saw Spaceballs, he joked that Brooks had quoted him, a wink from one parody pioneer to another. Because long before the giant ship crawled across the screen or Dark Helmet inhaled his own Schwartz, the galaxy of spoofs had already begun with duct tape, junk drawers, and one guy with a camera. Spaceballs didn't start the parody tradition, it just blew it wide open. Number 4. Green screens that spooked the cast. On modern sets, green screens are background noise. But in 1986, they were alien technology, glowing walls of neon light nobody fully trusted. Cast and crew whispered rumors between takes. Staring at that green too long could strain your eyes, maybe even damage them. No one knew who started it, but everyone heard it. Bill Pullman remembers slipping on sunglasses between shots just to play it safe, while other actors turned away from the backdrop whenever possible. Effects artists tried explaining that it was harmless, but the myth kept spreading, the kind of low-budget superstition that haunts early visual effects sets. Looking back, it's hilarious. This was a movie filled with giant helmets, talking dogmen, jammed radar screens, and a ship shaped like an RV. Yet the thing everyone feared was a painted wall. Those rumors didn't last, but the snapshot they left behind is priceless. A reminder of how new, strange, and intimidating early movie magic could feel before it became Hollywood standard. Number 5. A costume that needed 3 people. John Candy didn't just play Barf, he hauled him around. Since Mel Brooks wanted Candy's face visible, the team ditched the full dog mask and built a hybrid rig. Floppy animatronic ears, a twitching tail, and a battery pack that weighed nearly 30 pounds, strapped to Candy's back like sci-fi camping gear. 3 puppeteers hid just off camera. One controlled the ears, one handled the tail, one monitored the battery pack so it wouldn't overheat. Candy had to sync his performance to their movements, smile here, head tilt there, while delivering lines with his trademark sweetness and timing. And one gag became infamous: Barf's tail repeatedly smacking Bill Pullman in the face mid-scene, completely unscripted. Brooks kept the takes because the reactions were real. Surprise, irritation, laughter, all blending into perfect parody. Barf wasn't just a costume. He was a 4-person operation riding on one man's back, and Candy made the madness feel effortless. Number 6. When Brooks went full blockbuster. Mel Brooks built his reputation on compact comedies, fast shoots, modest budgets, big laughs. But Spaceballs changed the scale. Suddenly, he was steering a movie that cost between $22 and $25 million, the largest production of his entire career. Nearly $5 million went to post-production alone. Model work, green screen composites, matte paintings, and the now iconic opening shot of a spaceship so long it became its own punchline. Sets stretched across entire sound stages. Costume departments scrambled to build armor, uniforms, and that monstrous dark helmet rig. For Brooks, it was a leap into a new kind of filmmaking, one where the parody had to be as big as the movies it mocked. If it looked cheap, the joke wouldn't land. If it looked too good, the comedy might disappear. Finding that balance meant burning cash every single day. The gamble paid off. Spaceballs didn't just spoof blockbusters, it joined them. Number 7. When A-listers said no. Before Bill Pullman ever touched a blaster, Mel Brooks went fishing for giants. He wanted an A-list space hero, someone iconic enough to anchor a parody built on Star Wars mythology. So he sent offers to Tom Cruise and Tom Hanks, two of the biggest names on Earth at the time. Both passed, politely but firmly. Brooks suddenly needed someone affordable, flexible, and willing to play a man who flies a Winnebago through space. Enter Bill Pullman, theater-trained, grounded, and unknown enough that audiences wouldn't bring expectations from other movies. Pullman clicked instantly with John Candy, creating a buddy comedy rhythm the script desperately needed. And when he stepped into scenes with Rick Moranis, his calm, straight man energy became the perfect counterweight to Dark Helmet's chaos. The big names said no, and that's the twist. The unknown on Brooks's list became the lone star the movie actually needed, the hero who made the parody feel real. Number 8. The part built for Steve Martin. Mel Brooks didn't picture Colonel Sanders as a background officer. He pictured Steve Martin, wild-eyed, sharp-tongued, a master of controlled panic. Brooks wrote the part with Martin's rhythms in mind, the clipped sarcasm, the sudden explosions of disbelief, the way he could make a single reaction shot funnier than a page of dialogue. But the timing was impossible. Martin was in the middle of one of the busiest stretches of his career, juggling movies and national tours. He loved Brooks, but he couldn't squeeze in a space parody built around endless costume fittings and FX-heavy setups. So Brooks pivoted. He cast George Weiner, an actor with the instincts of a straight man and the quiet confidence to land jokes without ever winking. Weiner didn't imitate Martin. He leaned into understatement, becoming the perfect foil for Rick Moranis' unhinged Dark Helmet. Fans still imagine the Martin version, but Weiner built something better, a Sanders who made absurdity feel believable. Number 9. Yogurt was written for Wilder. For decades, Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder were a comedy supernova, Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, two minds firing in perfect sync. So when Brooks wrote Yogurt, the wise, sparkly guardian of the Schwartz, he secretly pictured Wilder beneath the gold makeup. But by the mid-80s, Wilder had stepped away from Brooks's orbit, chasing his own projects and slowing down his workload. Brooks joked that Wilder had abandoned him, always with affection, never with bitterness. But the message was clear. Their on-screen partnership had quietly ended. Brooks filled the gap himself. He stepped into the gold robe, painted his face, and delivered Yogurt with a mixture of rabbi wisdom, used car salesman hustle, and that unmistakable Brooks grin. It wasn't the duo reunited, but it worked. Yogurt became a cult icon not because Brooks replaced Wilder, but because he honored him, playing a role built for a friend who had moved on. Feel that goofy sci-fi madness calling back? If you want to blast off into the chaos again and hit ludicrous speed for real, you can grab your own copy through the links below. DVD, Blu-ray, or even VHS if you're old school. Thanks for the support. It really means a lot. Now, let's drop right back into this cosmic mess. Number 10. Stars who misread the madness. When she first read the script, Daphne Zuniga almost said no. She wasn't a Mel Brooks fan, didn't love broad parody, and found Brooks himself a little too chaotic in early meetings. She worried Princess Vespa might be a joke, not a character. But once she stepped on set, the chaos made sense. Brooks wasn't loud, he was passionate. And beneath the parody, he wanted her to have real emotional beats. By the end, she trusted him completely, enough to work with him again when he produced The Fly 2. John Hurt walked in with even less context. He thought Brooks wanted a fast cameo, a little wink at Alien, only to discover the director planned a full beat-for-beat chestburster parody. Hurt laughed, rolled his eyes, and delivered the immortal line,
"Oh no, not again."
He improvised it, turning a single moment into one of the movie's sharpest punchlines. Two actors, two total misunderstandings, and one reminder. In a Mel Brooks universe, confusion is just another setup for a perfect joke. Number 11. One voice that replaced the FX. On most sci-fi sets, sound effects come later. Months of mixers and engineers layering bleeps, sweeps, and radar pings. On Spaceballs, Mel Brooks didn't need any of that. He had Michael Winslow. Cast as the radar technician, Winslow walked onto the soundstage and asked a simple question. Want me to just do it? Brooks shrugged, waved the crew quiet, and Winslow fired off every sound in the entire console, live, in real time, with nothing but his voice. The beeps, the static, the lost signal, even the ridiculous "we've been jammed" raspberry routine, all him.
The radar, sir. It appears to be jammed.
The studio estimated he saved them thousands in audio work, but Brooks loved it for a different reason. It wasn't just a joke, it was magic, the kind only one performer on Earth could deliver. In a galaxy full of FX, one man with a microphone stole the whole scene. Number 12. The merch joke, born from a ban. When George Lucas gave Mel Brooks permission to parody Star Wars, he added one rule: no merchandise. Not one toy, not one t-shirt, nothing. Lucas feared kids might mistake Spaceballs toys for real Star Wars products, so Brooks agreed, reluctantly, and then he weaponized it. The merchandising ban became one of the funniest jokes in the entire movie. Yogurt's over-the-top sales pitch, Spaceballs the lunchbox, Spaceballs the flamethrower, was Brooks thumbing his nose at the deal he'd signed. The fake products, the absurd branding, the commercial chaos. All of it existed because Lucas forbid him from selling the real thing. Lucas later saw the scene and laughed so hard he told Brooks it was the best parody jab in the film. A legal restriction turned into a legendary punchline, and Spaceballs became the only blockbuster that made merchandising iconic, by never selling any. Number 13. A Goosebumps icon in space. Before he terrified a generation with haunted masks and ventriloquist dummies, R.L. Stine wrote something much stranger, the official Spaceballs novelization. Under his pen name, Jovial Bob Stine, he adapted Brooks' script into a kid-friendly adventure, rewriting jokes, shrinking the innuendo, and sharpening the pacing to fit a middle-grade readership. He treated it like a real sci-fi quest, not just a parody, giving Lone Star and Barf more emotional beats than the movie ever had time for. Brooks handpicked Stine after reading his earlier tie-ins, impressed by how effortlessly he translated film chaos into book form. The result didn't sell like Goosebumps, but it became a cult curiosity, a bizarre intersection between Hollywood spoof and future horror icon. Before Stine ruled the book fair, he helped Lone Star rule the galaxy, one joke at a time. Number 14. When Star Wars revived Spaceballs. For 12 years, Spaceballs drifted quietly through cult classic orbit, loved on VHS, quoted at parties, but fading from the mainstream. Then 1999 hit, and the Star Wars prequels reignited the galaxy. Suddenly, a whole generation went hunting for every parody they'd missed. At the end of that search, they found Spaceballs. Mel Brooks watched the surge and made a sharp left turn. Instead of mounting an expensive live-action sequel, he built an animated universe, Spaceballs. The animated series became his sandbox, spoofing lightsabers, warp drives, superheroes, hobbits, and anything else that dominated late 90s fandom. It aired quietly on G4 and Canada's Super Channel, without Bill Pullman, Rick Moranis, or John Candy, which meant most fans never saw it live. But the ones who did found something wild. A hidden, over-the-top sequel that pushed the jokes farther than the movie ever could. The prequels revived Star Wars. The cartoon revived Spaceballs in the strangest, boldest way possible. Number 15, when a flop turned immortal. When Spaceballs opened in 1987, it didn't roar, it coughed. Reviews were lukewarm, box office numbers were soft, and critics shrugged it off as a parody that arrived too late to matter. In a summer ruled by real FX sci-fi spectacles, a goofy spoof felt out of step. But the galaxy changed once it reached living rooms. VHS rentals exploded. Cable reruns turned Lone Star and Barf into midnight companions. College dorms adopted it. Kids memorized every Dark Helmet meltdown and every yogurt one-liner. The movie that critics dismissed suddenly had a second life, louder, funnier, and more loyal than its theatrical run ever suggested. Over the next decade, Spaceballs didn't just gain fans. It became a rite of passage. It wasn't built for opening weekend glory. It was built to live forever on pause, rewind, and late-night laughter. Number 16, sci-fi parodies breaking point. Before Spaceballs, studios treated sci-fi spoofs as tiny, cheap one-off jokes, things made with cardboard sets and borrowed props. But Mel Brooks flipped the formula. He gave parody a full Hollywood production, sprawling sets, practical starships, FX teams, costumes detailed enough to rival the real space operas. The gamble worked. Suddenly, executives realized genre parody didn't have to look cheap to be funny, and audiences loved seeing entire galaxies skewered with affection instead of mockery. After Spaceballs, the industry loosened its grip. Projects like Galaxy Quest, Mars Attacks, and whole waves of FX-heavy spoofs finally had a lane. Brooks didn't just poke fun at sci-fi. He proved it could laugh at itself, and still pack theaters. Number 17, the maybe movie that won't die. For decades, Spaceballs 2, The Search for More Money, lived as the greatest joke Mel Brooks ever wrote.
Will we ever see each other again?
God willing, we'll all meet again in Spaceballs 2. The search for more money.
A parody of sequels that existed only as a punchline. Fans begged, rumors swirled, cast members teased, but nothing materialized. Then suddenly, the galaxy stirred. A 2027 sequel announcement hit the trades, sending fans into the same debate they've had for 30 years. Is this actually happening? Or is Brooks pulling the ultimate meta trick? The timing makes it believable. Star Wars is massive again. Nostalgia is ruling the box office, and everyone wants the kind of comfort food comedy Brooks perfected. But the silence from key cast members has fans equally convinced it might just be the last great Spaceballs joke. Either way, the fact that the idea of a sequel can spark this much joy, that's already a win for a spoof that was never supposed to survive hyperspace. Bonus fact. In 2018, a construction crew in Toronto peeled back a wall and found a ghost. A massive Spaceballs billboard, but barely. 3 decades of weather had stripped it to shadows. Mel Brooks was a whisper at the top. Spaceballs was more outline than letters, faded so deep you had to squint to read it. It wasn't a relic, it was a skeleton. Fans showed up anyway, staring at a wall that barely remembered the movie it once advertised. They didn't need bright colors. They needed proof something from 1987 had survived, even if survival meant flakes of paint and memory. Then it vanished again, sealed behind new construction, swallowed back into Toronto like a myth that surfaced only long enough to prove it once existed. Spaceballs returned as a faded outline on a crumbling wall, barely visible, barely legible, barely there. And somehow, that felt exactly right. Spaceballs was never meant to be smooth or serious. It was chaotic, cheap, ridiculous. And that's exactly why it endured. Mel Brooks didn't spoof sci-fi. He hugged it, roasted it, and handed fans the kind of madness only a true believer could make. It outlived the critics. It outran its box office stumble. And it became a cult galaxy, where Dark Helmet is gospel, and Yogurt's merchandising rant gets truer every year. If this galaxy still makes you laugh, drop a comment. Tell us your favorite moment, your favorite line, the joke that still hits you at ludicrous speed. Because in the world of Spaceballs, nothing ever fades. It just waits for the next fan to go to plaid.
Did this surprise you? Tell me which part hit you hardest. If you like this moment, share it, like and subscribe for more legendary comebacks.